Ubisoft has people running defense for Assassin's Creed like crazy. Because every piece of media that they release about Assassin's Creed is just getting like massively shit on.
Well, apparently when Ubisoft is not using bots to defend themselves, they're using Sweet Baby Inc. Park Place reports Japanese consultant used by Ubisoft and the New York Times to attack gamers over AC Shadows was actually a Sweet Baby.
I wonder who thought this was a good idea, that how do we deal with people not liking our product? Let's attack them and maybe they'll have to like it after that. What kind of a dumbass strategy is that?
Inc. employee. It's got to be some of the worst things you could do to defend yourself as a company, using bots and using Sweet Baby Inc. Like, what are they thinking? In a most recent hit piece by the New York Times that appears to have been done in collaboration with Ubisoft, the outlet's Zachary Small cited a so-called Japanese consultant and translator who claimed that criticism of the game was being done by individuals in the West using translators, and that the Japanese people were not upset with how the game not only featured Yasuke as a protagonist, but...
This is the classic journalism spin. A lot of people need to be aware of this because it's a huge problem that goes over a lot of people's heads. So we're going to look at this statement here, and we're going to draw a line around it. Who claimed that the criticism of the game was being done by individuals in the West using translators. And then this part right here, actually just the rest of it, basically, is the part that's not true. So what usually people do and journalists do is they tell a story by telling you one truth and one lie. It is absolutely verifiably true that a lot of the comments that were posted in Japanese were in fact people from the West that were just using Google Translate to make the letters in Japanese. This is verifiable, it is true, and it is unequivocally stupid, number one, and also these people were not Japanese. However, to say that, and this is what happens, right? So like you say something that's true, you get people, yeah, I remember seeing that, and then you tell the lie. The Japanese people are not upset about how the game not only features Yasuke as a protagonist, but also that he's depicted as a samurai. So there we go. That's exactly how it happens. And the big problem here, the reason why this keeps happening, is because the average person has, I think, less of a command of the English language now than they did 10 years ago. And I think 10 years ago, they had less of a command of the English language then than they did 10 years prior to that. The problem is that reading and literacy levels are going, and also like, it's not even just reading and literacy, it's competency with reading. That's what really matters, right? It's not just, oh, do I know what I'm reading? It's about, can I evaluate what I'm reading? And the answer to that is no. People cannot see this, and they get manipulated easily.
That he's depicted as a samurai. Bro, people in Japan literally made a song that mocks AC Shadows that in only 2 months has already got to nearly 3 million views.
Jesus.
And of course, all over the internet, plenty of Japanese people have also criticized Ubisoft, plenty of videos, plenty of posts all over social media, etc.
And also, it's true that every single comment that's made in Japanese is not also made by a Westerner. It's, again, muddying the waters. It's disinformation. IQ is dropping across the board from fluoride. For sure. So true. You're right about everything. It's also flat.
And these bootlickers really want to try and say that it's all just Westerners using translators. They then write about Hashimoto, who, as you can see here, was listed as a freelance narrative design consultant over at Sweet Baby Inc.
So this is the person who wrote it, and then they were actually on Sweet Baby. Yeah, what a fucking surprise. It reminds me of the George Carlin, it's all a big club and you're not in it. Man, that's crazy, isn't it?
And they say Hashimoto told the New York Times, quote, it was people in the West who were upset with seeing Yasuke as a samurai.
Right.
Small added. Small, for those that don't know, is the journalist behind said New York Times article.
Yes.
They say, Small added that Hashimoto explained, quote, that many of the negative online comments written in Japanese appear to have been roughly translated from English. The narrative...
Many of the... And so this is, again, if you look again, many of the negative comments, which is true, but is many most? Is many 20%? I would say 20% of something is very many of them. Like 1 out of 5 is huge. Online comments written in Japanese appear to have been roughly translated from English. And also, this is only in the context of one video that's being used as a sample. And the sample is being used from the Ubisoft Japan video. Whereas there were other people with Japanese communities that talked about it that transcended that and also other videos about it that were universally negative. So it's, again, more misinformation and more misleading of the reader.
The narrative that Hashimoto, Small, and Ubisoft were trying to spin was outrageous to begin with, given that Small had written just 2 paragraphs ahead of his citation of Hashimoto that Ubisoft attempted to assume concerns about the game's authenticity, apologizing in a lengthy statement for promotional materials that it said had bothered some Japanese audiences.
Attempted to assuage concerns about a game's authenticity. So, yes, very clear. It is very clear that Ubisoft thought this was a problem. And if Ubisoft actually thought that the only people that were unhappy were racist Westerners that don't like black people, they wouldn't have posted a message in Japanese to their Japanese audience apologizing to them directly. So even Ubisoft doesn't believe this, because if they did, they wouldn't have posted a Japanese apology. And this is, again, it's the problem. This is what happens when you use logic. This type of thinking immediately falls apart.
Another contradiction there. Even before this, Small noted, the inclusion of Yasuke was the primary complaint. But observers also pointed to the presence of Chinese architecture and period inappropriate flags. The controversy became so heated that a small right-wing political party in Japan formally asked the government to comment on what is considered historical inaccuracies.
So, again, so you see a small right-wing party, and this is like any time that I see, this is like just like there are words, let me actually think about this. There's a lot of extra ones there. Let me go ahead and just skip all of those. And, oh yeah, there's the Sony thing. I remember that. Yeah, that was my prediction. Yeah, I have a lot of these. Okay, let's have another one. Words that when I read them, I realize I am reading propaganda. So, far right. Alt-right. Believed by some to be. Right wing, yeah. I mean, just all variants of that, basically. Communist. Socialism. Nazi. Conspiracy theory. Woke. DEI. Let's start with this. Any time that I read one of these words, I instantly put my guard up. These are some of the most misused words right now in discourse. Any time that I see any of these words used for any reason, I am immediately on guard. Why not left? Well, that's the communist and socialism. The difference is like, actually, how do you spell fascism? I know that's not how to spell it, but maybe it is. Anyway, yeah, fascism is another one, right? Yeah, they're basically buzzwords. It is. That's a shock. But yeah, what's DEI? Diversity, inclusion, and diversity, equity, inclusion. It's like a big, what do you call it? It's a big umbrella term. And so incels, yeah, I could have more listed as well. But like the point that I'm making here is this. It's that when I read these words, I automatically assume that the person is trying to mislead me or make me think something by proxy. So a right-wing political group, they are trying to make you think by proxy that they're racist. And this is what a lot of people do. And I actually really like reading articles like this, and I like talking about this, because I think that there's not enough people that are dissecting this language and showing it for how misleading and manipulative it really is. We have a huge problem with like language manipulation. And again, the fact that so many people are functionally illiterate, or at least they lack the critical thinking to evaluate things that are written, that this goes over so many people's heads. But you're seeing this happen. It will only get worse. It will. And that's why I love doing videos like this and talking about it. So it's, again, a small right wing, and also small, right? Which is true. This is all true. And the problem is that it is framed in a way that implies something that's inaccurate. Formally asked the government to comment on what it considered historical inaccuracies. This is not a question, by the way, what it considered. So basically what it's doing here is that it's taking the presence of Chinese architecture, it's attributing it to a source that is not to be believed, and then it's using the fact that the source is considering it as a way to invalidate what the consideration was used as. Do you see how this happens? It's a framing device. Yes, it's a framing device. Words are propping up a weak statement. Yes. And again, I love reading this stuff. I love doing it because it's like, I fucking hate it. I hate the manipulation. I hate the lies. It's so annoying. It's the spin. Yeah.
If it was just Western people, why was a Japanese political party requesting an investigation into the game? And why did Ubisoft issue a so-called apology to Japanese gamers?
Great question.
Nevertheless, it's been discovered that Hashimoto was actually an employee of Sweet Baby Inc. from February 2020 to April 2023, as noted by his own LinkedIn profile.
Yeah.
Not only is Hashimoto a former employee of Sweet Baby Inc., but he's an activist journalist whose articles are featured at Polygon, Siliconera, Vim, and multiple outlets owned by Gamers Group. Mark Kern, aka Grums, shared one article Hashimoto wrote on Medium where he criticized Animal Crossing New Horizons by acknowledging Japan's history of colonial rule. You gotta be kidding me. This dude actually got pressed by Animal Crossing, saying it's like a colonizer game.
By the way, we didn't do colonization. We did conquering. We came to America and we killed everybody here and we took their stuff. The whole idea that it's colonialism, this is a euphemism. And Japan did the same thing. Everywhere did this. Genghis Khan did this. Colonialism is a euphemism for conquering. And that's what really happened.
Why are these people always so friggin' lame and weird? Earlier this year, Hashimoto also wrote an article at Vim.
That's a great
titled,
question.
How Gay Can You Be in Dragon's Dogma 2? An Investigation. What the frick? What am I reading here, man? It is unsurprising that Ubisoft and the New York Times...
you can have sex with a cat. I mean, I feel like that's pretty good. Like, that seems like, I mean, if you can do that, you do whatever the hell you want. Yes, you can. You go to the brothel. I did it on accident. It was on, I didn't mean to do it. Like, I didn't try to, I didn't know it was going to happen. I didn't know, basically, like, I was like I don't know why. Like, it was just like, I don't know what, I mean, yeah, I don't even.
Use Hashimoto as a so-called expert to attack gamers.
Right.
It's an old play the Access Media uses. For example,
yeah, this is exactly right. They're using this person, and again, like, you know, they have a Japanese last name, and so they're going to be seen as a person who is looking at it from the perspective of Japan. And that's, again, more types of, it is an appeal to authority. It's like a soft appeal to authority. And so it's no longer, and it's, again, like, what is it at the baseline? You know what it is at the baseline? Identity politics. It's, we are going to use this person's identity that's going to passively cause you to have an implicit level of trust and authenticity in their words for us to push an agenda that's misleading.
Amazon Prime previously used this play in the lead up to release The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power Season 1.
Yeah.
However, instead of using the New York Times, Amazon went to Vanity Fair and writers Anthony Breznican and Joanna Robinson. That duo then launched their attack on gamers, saying, when Amazon released photos of its multicultural cast, even without character names or plot details, the studio endured a reflexive attack from trolls, the anonymous online kind. Then they cited a woman...
And again, right, it's like people that don't want a, obviously, Lord of the Rings is written as a medieval European fantasy. Who do you think was in medieval Europe? Pretty much all white people. What are we even talking about? Yeah, it was all white people. Like, and I haven't seen Shogun, but I have a feeling that almost everybody there is probably going to be Japanese, right? Yeah. I wonder why. There's one white guy? Yeah, sure.
Named Maria Rios Maldonado, who they described as a Tolkien scholar. However, she's anything but. Rather, she was a PhD student at the University of Glasgow who is interested in ethics, feminist theory, and encountering the others in Tolkien's works. It's really funny how ethics for these people really just means bootlicking massive corporations.
It's not about bootlicking a massive corporation. It's about pushing an agenda that they believe in. What is the other in Tolkien's works? I'm assuming that this is probably how the Haradrim and the other types of like people from the East are perceived as being other races of people. That's probably the orc family. No, I think they're probably, I think that's probably what's going to happen.
To happen to be the Equality and Diversity Officer for the University of Glasgow Center for Fantasy and the Fantastic. I think I just lost IQ reading that right there. Anyways, continuing. Next, Vanity Fair used Maldonado to attack Tolkien fans and imply they're all racist for simply wanting a lore-accurate adaptation. She questioned, obviously there was going to be push and backlash, but the question is from whom? Who are these people that feel so threatened or disgusted by the idea that an elf is black or Latino or Asian?
And this is one thing that a lot of people do, is they used words like threatened or disgusted in order to emotionally elevate the conversation to make their opponents feel and seem less reasonable. This is a very common debate strategy where you're not actually appealing to an argument. You're not creating any sort of a compelling agreement or like a compelling narrative. You're just trying to make the other person look ridiculous. And that's what what happens extremely commonly. It's ad hominem. I'm not really sure. I'd have to really think about that. But like what I'm saying is that they over-exaggerate it to make the people that are disagreeing seem unreasonable and to make themselves seem better. So anytime you see somebody that elevates language, like to threatened or disgusted or something like that, you should automatically assume that this person is trying to mislead you. It's bad faith. It's bad faith description.
The tactic did not end up working for Rings of Power, as The Hollywood Reporter's Kim Masters reported in April 2023 that 63% of individuals who watched part of the show's premiere back in 2022 did not complete the show. She wrote, while Amazon, like other streamers, provides only limited data and internally held information even more closely than usual in the series, sources confirmed that The Rings of Power had a 37% domestic completion rate. For those outside the U.S., the completion rate was higher. Masters shared overseas.
Very hard for me to say, is that good or bad comparatively?
It reached 45%. A 50% completion rate would be solid, but not spectacular, according to insiders. And so this sort of tactic is also unlikely to work with Assassin's Creed Shadows, as Ubisoft CEO Yves Guillemot already revealed that the game is unlikely to be the best-selling Assassin's Creed game of all time.
I could assume that.
Barclays' Nick Dempsey asked him, when you talk about it being the most ambitious, are you hoping for it to be the best-selling Assassin's Creed game? To which Guillemot replied, at this time we can say we expect Assassin's Creed to be among the high sellers of the company so far. Okay, so...
I mean, like, basically, no, we don't think it's going to be a bestseller, but we think it'll do well. Yeah, sure.
In other words, he dodged the question. The game's pre-orders do not look good either. Craig Skitstimus, aka Stuttering Craig, who owns and hosts the Side Scrollers podcast, shared that a retail insider informed him that the game is selling less than one copy per store. He says, my insider told me that as of this morning at their nationwide big box chain, Assassin's Creed Shadows has less than 800 pre-orders combined for Xbox and PlayStation 5 company-wide.
I don't believe that. I think that's too low. The reason why I don't believe that is because at the Japanese PlayStation store, the copy for like Assassin's Creed was like number 1 and number 3 for the deluxe edition and the base edition. So like if Japan probably doesn't like this more than we do because they feel like it's an assault on their culture and they're topping the charts with that, that's only physical. Yeah. I don't think this is I don't think that you can really base anything off of this. You have no frame of reference.
They have over 900
right?
stores.
How many people pre-ordered Dragon's Dogma 2? How many people pre-ordered Star Wars Outlaws? How many people pre-ordered like you present a number with no context and it's like, wow, whoa, what? Like what does that mean?
Less than 1 pre-order per store. Yikes. On the PlayStation Store, the Ultimate Edition of the game, which costs around $130, is ranked 16th behind New World Eternum, Dragon Age: The Veilguard, Silent Hill 2, Mortal Kombat 1 Chaos Reigns Expansion, and Dragon Ball Sparking Zero.
Well, of course it is, because it's been out for a long time. But when it first came out, it was highly ranked on the PlayStation Store.
Which, by the way, is a game that I'm excited for. Budokai Tenkaichi 3 was one of the best fighting games of all time. As for Assassin's Creed Shadows, the base game is even further down the list in the 21st place behind Disney epic Mickey Rebrushed, Throne and Liberty, and Sonic X Shadow Generations. The Gold Edition sits on the second page in 30th place. And
that's also another reason why it would not be successful. It's because the instances of it are being split. So you can see Dragon Age is here and also here. So if there's 2 separate placings and one of them has 60 and the other one has 40, you could easily see that, and this seems to be the case with New World Eternum, Assassin's Creed Shadows, but games that only have 1 release copy are going to have a natural advantage inside of this algorithm because they're not pulling and dividing the sales between 2 different types of copies of the game. So like, and this is, it's very important to, let's just try to look at this fairly. That's all I want to do.
Saying, what do you make of this revelation that Hashimoto was a former Sweet Baby Inc. employee? Yeah, like I said in the very intro, I just can't believe that Ubisoft is doing what they do and they think this is like the right move. They're one of the largest gaming companies in the entire world, and they could just put power and money towards making good games, but apparently that's too much to ask. Instead, we see them come up with all kinds of excuses and contradictions, bunch of bots all over the internet attempting to defend them. We see it all over Twitter and YouTube comments, for example. Heck, I made a video a few days ago where I talked about how a video that I made talking about the terrible financial situation for Ubisoft had gotten an influx of bot comments. They were like spamming the comment section with periods. And then in between the period spam, there were other bots leaving comments attempting to defend Ubisoft and Star Wars Outlaws, but their comments sounded so nonsensical. And now it looks like the New York Times is collaborating with some ex-Sweet Baby Inc. employee to defend Ubisoft as well. This whole situation.
Here's one thing you have to keep in mind, is that every single piece of mainstream media that's like part of this like kind of cabal, every single one of them is against you. They all have the exact same opinion about this, and they will work in concert to destroy your reputation and to make your position seem unreasonable and bad. It's the same reason why, like, for example, like Stellar Blade comes out, or Hogwarts Legacy comes out, or what was the recent one? Palworld comes out, or I think there's a couple other games that were like very big controversy games. Space Marine 2 comes out. Every single one of them has the same cookie cutter opinion, and they have the exact same agenda. You're seeing a diversity of company names, but you're not seeing any diversity of thought. All of these mainstream publications have the exact same agenda, and they work together to push that agenda. Like, it's unironically a matrix. And you'd have to be blind not to see this.
Is just so bizarre. On top of all that, there was the old news where they came out with Skull and Bones trying to say this is like a quadruple A game, everybody. And then the whole like gamers need to get comfortable not owning their games. It's like the majority.
I think again that comment was out of context. There's a lot of things that we can shit on Ubisoft for. That isn't one of them.
Of stuff that comes out from this company is just like the worst statements and the worst actions they could possibly do. It's like they have an option. You want to do something good, or you want to do like the worst option possible, and they always pick the worst option. And to end with some comedy,
Yeah,
let's go back to that whole
the combat
Hashimoto Animal
dialogue.
Crossing thing. Because Hashimoto made this tweet, says, "Hi, I wrote about Animal Crossing New Horizons and why acknowledging Japan's history of colonial rule is important to the discussion." No, it's literally not at all. It's a freaking...
Nobody cares. Nobody thinks it's important at all. That's what I think people need to realize, is that just because you say something is important doesn't make it important. Obviously, it doesn't cover everything, but feel free to read New Horizons and Japanese Colonialism. Oh, God.
Animal Crossing game. If you're taking it that seriously and getting all mad at it, something's seriously wrong with this person. And they end by saying, obviously it doesn't cover everything, but feel free to
Well,
read.
it's the old adage of when you're a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. These are people that view everything through this lens. So as soon as they see something like Animal Crossing, they can't help themselves but to think the exact same thing. How do people get like this? I think that people get like this by... I don't know. It's probably really complicated. I don't really... I think that a very large component of it is actually guilt. It is it's a sense of guilt that they have, and then it's performative empathy in order to like get positive attention. In general, I think that if you want to find out why somebody thinks something, figure out what they get out of it or how it benefits them, and then you can generally have the answer.
The headline: Animal Crossing New Horizons and Japanese Colonialism. Weirdo. Anyways,
Yeah,
I will leave it
real
there.
weird.
Thank you all for tuning in. If you enjoyed my coverage on this topic, please consider liking and or subscribing. Appreciate ya. See ya in the comments and in the next one.
Well, there it
Today
is.
we talk
Just
about
a second. Just a second.
Well, apparently...
I completely agree with what he's saying, and I just hope you guys can realize and read, and hopefully try to read between the lines and look at the way that something is being implied, because this is one thing that I think really matters a lot, is that when you realize that somebody is trying to make you think a certain thing, you have to have your guard up. And I think it's also really important when we're talking about things that we agree with, too. Because, like, I think that a lot of times people are more willing to accept misinformation if the misinformation reaffirms what they already believe. They're like, well, hey, give the video a like, by the way. This is very, very good. I was glad to see this. I've watched a lot of Hero High videos over the years. And, yeah, Pin of Truth, yeah, we knew it. Exactly, everybody knew it. The Japanese realized it wasn't a video game, but a propaganda piece aimed at rewriting their history. It wasn't aimed at rewriting their history. It was aimed at building up Ubisoft's reputation as being a developer that cares about social issues. That's why they did it. That's why they care. It had nothing to do with anything else.